She had 3 seconds. 3 seconds before the man across the room swallowed a drink that would stop his heart before he even set the glass down. 3 seconds to decide if she was going to do something about it. Adiz had been a server at Club Helix for exactly 47 days. She knew the rules. Keep your head down. Fill the glasses. Don't look the clients in the eye. Don't ask questions about the men in the private booths who made other men sweat just by walking into the room. Survive the shift. Go home. Repeat. She had been surviving just fine. And then she overheard 2 men in the corridor behind the bar. She hadn't been eavesdropping. She'd gone to get a fresh bottle from the backstock, and the corridor wall was thin and their voices were careless. One of them laughed, a cold, thin sound, and said, "By the time he finishes that glass, it'll already be done." She froze. "And the girl?" the second voice said. "What girl?" "There is no girl. There's only the body we'll find in the morning." She pressed herself against the wall, heart slamming so hard she could feel in her throat. She already knew who they were talking about. There was only one man in this club important enough to kill this quietly. She'd seen him come in. She always noticed him, even when she was trying not to. Everyone did. The private booth in the far left corner. The kind of silence that moved with him through the room. Park Jisoo. She didn't know exactly what he was. She'd heard whispers. The kind of whispers that made the senior servers go quiet whenever they said his name. But she knew enough. And she knew the glass of whiskey she'd personally delivered to his table 20 minutes ago was now sitting in front of him, and 2 men in that corridor were counting down the seconds. She should have walked away. Every single practical part of her brain said, "You do not know this man. You owe this man nothing. You have enough problems. Walk away." She thought about her mother waiting for money she hadn't sent yet. She thought about her little sister's school fees. She thought about the debt collector who'd knocked on their door 3 times last month. She thought, if I let this man die and I could have stopped it, what does that make me? She was moving before she finished the thought. The walk across the club floor felt like crossing a minefield. Her legs carried her toward the private booth, and she told herself to look calm, look purposeful, look like a server with a reason to be exactly where she was going. Park Jisoo looked up the moment she stopped beside his table. His eyes were the color of deep water, dark, still, and completely unreadable. He was younger than she expected up close, not much older than 30. The kind of face that would have been beautiful if it weren't so controlled, every expression locked behind something impenetrable. He didn't speak. He just watched her. Adiz's mind went blank. She had not planned what to do next. She had gotten this far on pure adrenaline, and now she was standing in front of one of the most dangerous men in Seoul with absolutely zero plan, and the clock was still running. So she did the only thing she could think of. She leaned down, fast before courage could fail her, and she kissed him. Her lips pressed against his, and the entire world seemed to hold its breath. He didn't move, not even a fraction, not even a pull away. His body was perfectly still, his hands flat on the table, his expression unreadable even through the contact. Like he had experienced stranger things than a server kissing him without warning on a Tuesday evening, and maybe he had. When she pulled back, only slightly, only enough to speak, she kept her voice at barely a whisper against his mouth. "Your drink is poisoned." 2 men in the back corridor arranged it. "Don't touch the glass." She felt the exact moment the words landed. Something shifted in him, almost invisible, the kind of shift that happened beneath the surface, like a current changing direction deep underwater where no one could see it. He didn't react. He didn't startle. He didn't reach for the glass or knock it over or shout. He simply looked at her, and then, very slowly, the corner of his mouth curved. Not a smile exactly. Something more dangerous than that. "That," he said, his voice quiet and even, "was either the bravest thing or the most reckless thing I've seen in a very long time." Adiz straightened up. Her knees were shaking. She was fairly certain the color had drained completely from her face. "I'm going to go back to work now," she said, because she could not think of a single other thing to say. "No," he said, "you're not." Before she could process what that meant, everything happened at once. The glass shattered, not because anyone knocked it over, because a bullet hit it. The shot came from somewhere above and to the left, and the sound of it was enormous in the enclosed space of the club. Whiskey and crystal exploded across the table. Someone screamed. Then the whole room erupted. Adee stood frozen for exactly 1 second before a hand closed around her wrist and pulled. Park Jisoo moved with a speed and precision that felt less like a human reaction and more like something that had been trained into his body over years, like breathing. He was out of the booth, pulling her with him, his body cutting through the panicking crowd with focused efficiency. People scattered around them. More shots. Glass somewhere behind them. He pulled her behind a concrete support column near the club's back wall. He pressed her against it with his body, broad shoulders forming a shield between her and the direction of the gunfire. "Don't move from here," he said. His voice was still calm. The chaos behind them might as well have been background music. "Not until I say." "There are people shooting at us," Adee said, and she was appalled by how steady her own voice came out. "At me," he corrected. "You just happened to be adjacent." He reached into his jacket. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, he'd produced a gun and was already leaning out around the column, completely unhurried, assessing. Then he fired. Once, twice, 3 times. Each shot was precise, clean, no wasted movement. From somewhere across the club, she heard bodies hit the floor and told herself not to think too hard about what that meant. Men in dark clothing materialized from the edges of the room. His security, she realized, moving through the chaos with the coordinated efficiency of people who had done this before and expected to do it again. They communicated in short bursts. The gunfire from the other direction began to slow, then stopped. Park Jisoo turned back to her. He scanned her from head to toe, his eyes moving quickly, checking for damage. His jaw was tight. "Are you hurt?" "I don't know." "No, I don't think so." "Good." He holstered the gun in one motion. "We're leaving." He took her hand, and the grip was firm and certain, like there was no version of events in which she didn't come with him. He positioned himself between her and the worst of what was left behind them as they moved toward the exit. She kept her eyes forward. She didn't look at the floor. Outside, an all-black car waited with its engine already running, a door already open. "Get in," he said. Adee stopped. The night air hit her face, and the reality of the last 10 minutes hit her all at once, and she stood there on the pavement outside a club in Seoul staring at a car she did not know, belonging to a man she did not know, while her hands shook and her ears still rang from the gunshots. He turned back to look at her. "I understand you're afraid," he said. "You have every reason to be. But if you stand on that pavement alone, you become a target. And I cannot protect you from here." She looked at the car. She looked at him. She got in. If you found this story the moment it was uploaded, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I love seeing where in the world this family is. Your support is what keeps these stories going. And trust me, you're going to want to stay for what happens next. The inside of the car was dark and quiet, the city sliding past outside the windows. Adee pressed herself against the far door and tried to breathe normally and failed. The man beside her adjusted his cufflinks. Like nothing had happened. Like this was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. "You're not going to explain?" she said. He glanced at her. "What would you like me to explain?" "People just try to kill you. In a crowded club. With guns." "Yes. And she gestured at all of him, fixing your cufflinks. "The evening called for a certain level of presentation," he said. "That requirement doesn't change based on whether or not someone shoots at me." She stared at him. "Who are you?" "Park Jisoo." "I know your name." "That's not what I asked." Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite amusement, but adjacent to it. "What you're really asking," he said, "is what kind of man has people trying to kill him in nightclubs. And the honest answer is that I am the kind of man who has spent many years making enemies of very powerful people. Tonight was not unexpected." "You were." Adee looked down at her hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. "I need to go home," she said. "I have work in the morning. I have 3 jobs, and the first one starts at 6 a.m., and Her voice cracked unexpectedly, and she hated it. "I just need to go home." He was quiet for a moment. "You can't go home," he said. The words landed heavily. "What?" "You kissed me in front of the entire club. Cameras. Witnesses. Everyone who was in that room tonight saw your face. And within the next few hours, Every single person connected to the men who try to kill me will know exactly who you are. He paused. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The shaking in her hands got worse. They'll come after me, she whispered. They'll come after you to get to me. Not because you matter to them, but because harming you is a way to harm me. And that, his voice was even certain, is something I cannot allow. I don't even know you. We've exchanged 30 words. How am I something they can use against you? He was quiet for a beat. And then, because I've never touched a woman publicly. Not in 5 years. Not at any event, any function, any club. My associates know this. My enemies know this. And tonight, he looked at her steadily. You changed that. Whatever you are to me, they will assume you matter. Which means you are now a liability. And a target. Adiz felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. Then just tell them I meant nothing, she said. Tell them it was random. A server, a moment, it didn't mean anything. Her voice was rising. I'll go back to Abaddon. I'll leave Korea. I'll disappear. I'm very good at disappearing. I've done it before. It's already too late for that. You don't know that. I do. He said it with the quiet certainty of someone who had been in this world long enough to know exactly how it worked. The moment your face appeared in that club tonight, the clock started. And the only way to stop it is to change what you are. She went still. What does that mean? He held her gaze. Marry me. The city outside the windows kept moving. Seoul at night, all light and noise and thousands of people living their ordinary lives, completely unaware that inside this car a stranger had just said the most insane thing Adiz had ever heard in her 24 years of living. She waited for him to take it back. He didn't. You're serious, she said. I don't make jokes about marriage. We don't know each other. We know enough. We know nothing. You don't know my name. Adiz, he said, like he'd always known it. Adiz Nwosu, 24 years old. From Abaddon originally, 2 sisters, one older, one younger. In Seoul for 14 months on a work permit. 3 jobs, the club, a convenience store on Mangwon-dong, and cleaning shifts at a hotel in Mapo 3 mornings a week. You send the majority of what you earn home and live on almost nothing. She stared at him. How do you know that? I know everyone who works in my establishments, he said simply. Club Helix belongs to me. I made my business to know the people in it. She didn't know what to do with that. The marriage, he continued, would be a contract. Temporary. Terms we both agree to. While it's in effect, you become untouchable. Not just a woman who kissed me once, but the wife of Park Ji-soo. No one will touch you. No one will threaten you. You will be protected by my name. And when it ends, when the threat is resolved and I say it's safe, we dissolve the contract. You walk away free, with enough money to change your life completely. He paused, and with my personal guarantee that no one will ever come looking for you again. Adiz pressed her hand against the window glass. It was cool, grounding. She thought about her sister's school fees, about her mother's medication, about the debt that had been accumulating since her father passed and left 3 women to manage what he'd left behind. She thought about the exhaustion of 3 jobs and never sleeping and sending every spare naira and one home and still watching the numbers barely move. She thought about what would happen if she said no and went home tonight and the men from that club found her in the morning. How temporary, she said, until I eliminate every active threat. Could be months. And the money? He named a figure. Adiz said nothing for a very long time. Then, I'll need to send some home immediately. Done. And I want it in writing. The whole arrangement. Every term. Of course. She exhaled slowly. Her whole body felt wrung out. All right, she said quietly. I'll do it. What Adiz did not know, could not know, was that Park Ji-soo had already calculated 17 other ways to protect her that did not require marriage. Safe houses. Relocation. Around-the-clock security in another city. He had run through every option in the silence of his own mind in the 90 seconds after she'd kissed him and before the shooting started. He had chosen none of them, because the moment her lips had touched his and she'd whispered your drink is poisoned against his mouth, something had happened that he was not prepared for, something that cracked through 5 years of deliberate, constructed distance. And he had looked at her face as she pulled back, the fear in her eyes, the resolve underneath it, the way she'd done the bravest thing she could think of even while her whole body shook with the effort of it. And he had thought, I am not letting this one go. He would never tell her that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he knew it the way he knew all the important things in his life, completely and without needing to say it out loud. The penthouse was on the 42nd floor of a building in Yongsan that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought glass and steel were the only materials worth using. It rose above the Han River like a monument to a certain kind of power, quiet and absolute. Inside, everything was precise. Clean lines, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the whole of Seoul look like it had been laid out for inspection. An older woman was waiting for them when they arrived, warm-faced, efficient, with the manner of someone who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing for a very long time. "This is Madame Yun," Park Ji-soo said. "She manages the household. Whatever you need, you ask her." Madame Yun bowed slightly and looked at Adiz with something that might have been approval. "Welcome. Let me show you to your room." The room was the size of Adiz's entire apartment in Mangwon-dong. The bed was the kind that looked like it had been designed specifically to make sleeping an event. Everything smelled clean and expensive and utterly foreign. There were clothes in the wardrobe, all her size. She stood in the middle of the room for a long time after Madame Yun left, not moving, just breathing. Then she walked to the window and pressed her palm against the glass and looked out at Seoul and thought, "My life just fell off a cliff, and I'm completely unsure whether I'm falling or flying." The contract was signed the next afternoon. The marriage registration happened the morning after that. A bureaucratic, paperless process in a government office with fluorescent lighting and a clerk who looked like he had seen everything and cared about none of it. Forms, stamps, 2 signatures. When they walked out, Park Ji-soo produced a ring from his inside jacket pocket. It was simple, a thin gold band with a stone that caught the light like a small, captured star. He slid it onto her finger without a word. She looked at it. "It doesn't feel real," she said. "It doesn't need to feel real," he said. "It only needs to be real." They stepped out of the building, and the cameras were already there. She hadn't expected that. The flash of lenses, the sharp questions shouted in Korean she only half understood, the sudden crush of journalists who had somehow already known. She stopped walking. Froze. The noise and light hit her all at once. His hand found the small of her back. "Steady." A quiet signal. "Keep moving. I have you." They made it to the car. The doors shut and muffled everything. "That was," she started. "The point," he said. "The world needs to see this. They need to know you exist, who you are, and what you are to me." She looked down at the ring. "Will it work?" He looked out the window. "It will buy us time," he said. "And time is what we need. If you're loving where this story is going, pause right now and hit that like button. It takes 2 seconds, and it tells me to keep going. And drop a comment. Do you trust Park Ji-soo? Should Adiz be letting her guard down? Because what happens next changes everything. 3 days after the marriage registration, Adiz was told she would be attending a gala. An event, Park Ji-soo said over breakfast, which he ate at his desk while reviewing documents, and which Adiz ate at the dining table, while trying to feel normal about the fact that she now technically lived in a penthouse. Seoul's major business families, political figures, a number of people who are watching very closely to see if I've genuinely changed my patterns or if this marriage is a tactical move. "And which is it?" she asked. He looked up from his tablet. For just a moment, something flickered in his expression that she couldn't read. "Both," he said. "Get ready. The stylists arrive at 3. The stylist arrived at 3, and by 7:30 Adiz stood in front of a floor-length mirror in a gown the color of burnt copper, her hair pinned in a way that felt like someone had sculpted it rather than styled it, her skin glowing under makeup applied by hands that clearly knew what they were doing. She looked like someone she had never met before, someone who belonged in the world she was about to enter. She walked down the stairs to the foyer, and Park Ji-soo looked up from his phone. He stopped, just for a second, a breath. His eyes moved over her slowly, and whatever composure he maintained in every other moment slipped, just slightly, just enough. "You look," he stopped, cleared his throat, started again. "You're ready." She raised an eyebrow. "That's what you were going to say? You're ready." The faintest trace of something, almost amusement, crossed his mouth. "You look remarkable," he said. "I was trying to decide if saying so would make you nervous." "It does," she admitted. "Then I won't say it again." He offered his arm. Shall we? The gala was held in a venue that looked like it had been borrowed from a different century. High-arched ceilings. Chandeliers that probably had their own insurance policies. Marble floors that reflected everything. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns who all had the particular kind of polish that came from money, so old it had stopped feeling like money and started feeling like atmosphere. And Adiz was, very clearly, the only black woman in the room. She felt it the moment they walked in. The shift in attention. The conversations that stuttered and resumed at a different volume. The eyes that moved to her and stayed there. She kept her chin level and her hand steady on his arm and told herself, "You have survived harder things than being stared at." He stayed close, his hand at her back, warm and constant. They worked the room, introductions, conversations, the particular social choreography of people who are always assessing each other. Park Ji-soo moved through it all with an ease that was almost annoying, knowing exactly what to say and when to say nothing. She tried to match his energy. She thought she was doing reasonably well. Then a man intercepted them near the bar. 60 perhaps, silver-haired, expensively dressed, with the bearing of someone who had never in his life been told no. He greeted Park Ji-soo with the warmth of a man who believed he and Park Ji-soo were equals. They were not. "Ji-soo, I've been looking for you all evening." He laughed. "We need to discuss that proposed joint venture. My people are very enthusiastic." His eyes landed on Adiz. The laugh died mid-syllable. "Oh." Something in his expression shifted. Not surprised exactly. Something more calculated. "I wasn't aware you'd brought someone." Park Ji-soo said nothing. The man's gaze moved over Adiz in a way that made her skin tighten. "Is this," he gave a small smile, the kind used to deliver condescension wrapped in plausible deniability. "Are you club staff? I think there may have been a mix-up with the guest list. This event is rather exclusive. Perhaps she'd be more comfortable." "This is my wife." Silence. Not the ordinary kind of silence. The kind that happens when a needle scrapes off a record. Every nearby conversation stalled. Heads turned. The man's expression became something Adiz had never seen before. The precise look of someone who has just understood that they have made an irreversible mistake. He started. "My wife," Park Ji-soo repeated. His voice had not changed in volume or tone. It was still perfectly even, but there was something underneath it now, like the feeling before lightning strikes. "Adiz Ji-soo, and I want to be certain I understand what you were about to say to her." The man opened his mouth, closed it. Park Ji-soo looked at him the way a surgeon looks at a particularly straightforward incision. "I will offer you one opportunity," he said quietly, "to say something different." Silence. I apologize," the man said. His confidence had evaporated so completely it was almost hard to believe it had ever existed. "I was not aware. I didn't mean to imply." "You implied precisely what you intended to imply," Park Ji-soo said. "And I want to be very clear, so that there is no future confusion." He turned slightly, his voice carrying just enough further to reach the nearest groups of guests who had been listening with the careful attention of people pretending not to listen. "This is my wife. She's not a guest at my table or a +1 at my event. She's the person I chose." Anyone in this room who cannot understand what that means, or who believes they can speak to her in a manner that suggests otherwise, will find that I have a very long memory and a great deal of patience for consequences. He paused. "Are we clear?" Murmurs. Agreement. Faces that had been watching, now looking quickly away. He turned back to the man. "As for our proposed joint venture, find a different partner. I no longer do business with people who disrespect my family." He said it simply, cleanly, the way you say something that doesn't require emphasis because it is simply true. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." He guided Adiz toward the far end of the room, his hand at her back, leaving the man standing exactly where he was. In the car on the way back, she was quiet for a long time. "Finally, you just ended a business deal because of me." "I ended a business deal because that man insulted you," he said. "The distinction matters. It costs you, though, less than you think." "I'm not worth," she started. "Stop." His voice was sharp enough that she stopped. He turned to look at her directly. "Don't say that. Not in front of me." She blinked. "You saved my life," he said. "You walked across that room, not knowing who I was, not knowing what would happen, and you did the thing that needed doing because you couldn't walk past someone in danger and do nothing. And since then you have handled everything. The shooting, the car, the contract, the cameras, the marriage, with more composure than people I have paid to do exactly that. His jaw tightened. You are not someone who should be spoken to the way that man spoke to you. And when I am standing in the room, no one will do so. Not ever. Adiz looked at her hands. The ring on her finger caught a passing streetlight. Thank you, she said quietly. He nodded once. Then, and if I ever hear you say you're not worth something again, I will take it as a personal insult. She looked at him, startled. When you diminish yourself, he said, you diminish the choice I made. And I have never made a choice I was not certain of. They were quiet the rest of the way home. But the silence was different now. Softer at the edges, less like distance, and more like something that simply didn't need to be filled. That night, they ate together in the kitchen because the dining table felt too formal and neither of them mentioned it. Madame Yin had left food prepared and they reheated it and ate side by side at the kitchen counter. And somewhere in the middle of it, Adiz started talking about home. She hadn't planned to. It just came. She told him about Abaddon, about her father, who had been a teacher and who had believed completely in the power of doing things correctly and working hard and expecting the world to reward it, and who had been wrong in every financial sense, but right in every other sense. About her mother, who had taken her father's death and turned it into something she could carry rather than something that carried her. About her older sister Chitara, who was studying nursing and who sent voice notes every Sunday morning. About her youngest sister Neka, who was 16 and who wanted to be an architect and who sent pictures of buildings she'd sketched in her notebook. I work for them, she said. That's the whole reason I'm here. Not because I particularly wanted to be in Korea, because the exchange rate works in their favor, and I can send more money from here than I could earn at home. Park just so listened. He did not interrupt, did not redirect, did not check his phone. He simply listened, his eyes on her, giving the conversation his full attention in a way that she realized she was not accustomed to. My mother's medication, she continued, went up in price 6 months ago. The shop in Abaddon started charging more. Neka's school fees are due at the end of next quarter, and I'm still 300,000 naira short. I've been working the extra shifts at the hotel to close the gap. She exhaled. That's what I was thinking about in the car. Not the guns. That I was going to lose the hotel shifts. He was quiet for a moment. The money I promised you, he said. You can send some home now. Tonight, if you want. I'll have it arranged. She looked at him. You do that? We have a contract, he said. I keep my agreements. She nodded slowly. Then, why are you doing all of this? And I mean, really, I know what you said about revenge and sending messages and your business strategy. But that's not the whole reason. I've been here enough days now to see that you don't do things for only one reason. He was quiet, the kind of quiet that is actually a consideration, not an avoidance. My father, he said finally, built something significant, and people spent 20 years trying to take it from him, piece by piece, through deals and threats and manipulation. He died before he finished protecting what he'd built. I inherited the work and the enemies both. He looked at his glass. I've spent 5 years not letting anyone close enough to be used as leverage against me. It was a decision I made deliberately, and I believed it was the right one. He looked at her. And then you walked across a room, he said, and kissed a stranger to save his life, not knowing what it would cost you. And I looked at you, and I thought, I do not want to be the kind of person who responds to that by doing nothing. Adiz held his gaze. So you married me, she said. I married you, he agreed. The corner of her mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile yet, but it was the shape of one. Are you still with me? Because I need you to drop a comment right now and tell me. Do you think Adiz is falling for him yet? Is she starting to trust him? And more importantly, should she? Hit subscribe if you haven't already, because part 2 drops soon and it is going to tear you apart in the best way. It was on the 5th morning that Adiz made the mistake. She woke to an empty penthouse. Park Jasu was gone before dawn. No note, no message, just his absence and Madame Yin moving quietly through the kitchen. She tried his phone. Voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. By midday, the walls of the penthouse had started to feel like the walls of a very beautiful cage, and she was not a person who did well in cages. She told herself she was just going to get some air. Some of her things from her apartment. Her own clothes, photos of her sisters, the small carved wooden elephant her father had given her the year she turned 12. Normal things. A normal errand. Madame Yun looked uncertain. Mr. Park said, "I'll be an hour." Adiz said, "Less. I'll take a taxi." Her apartment building looked smaller than she remembered, and it had only been 5 days. The stairwell smelled like old cooking and the specific particular damp of Korean winters, and she felt something loosen in her chest at the familiarity of it. She unlocked her door, stepped inside. Everything was exactly where she'd left it. She found a bag and started packing quickly. Clothes, the elephant, the framed photo of her family from 2 Christmases ago, her sister's most recent voice note that she had saved to a drive. She was folding her last clean work shirt when she heard footsteps in the corridor. She went still. The footsteps stopped outside her door. She backed against the far wall, heart accelerating. The door burst open. There were 3 of them, broad-shouldered men who moved with professional efficiency and completely blocked the exit. Before she could think or run or make a sound, something was pulled over her head, rough fabric blocking her sight, and her arms were wrenched behind her. She kicked. She screamed. Something hit her hard enough in the ribs to knock the air out of her, and she doubled over, gasping. "Stop fighting," a voice said. "It only gets worse if you fight." She was lifted and carried, and the sounds changed around her. Stairs, then cold air, then the metallic smell of a vehicle interior. The engine started. They were moving. She thought about Park Ji-soo, about the penthouse, about the ring on her finger. She thought, please know I'm gone. Please come. When the covering was removed from her head, she was in a room that made the penthouse look modest. High ceilings, artwork that cost fortunes, an office behind a massive desk, and behind the desk, a man she recognized. She had seen him only once, in the club, the night everything started. He had been sitting at a corner table with 2 other men, and she had carried drinks to his table, and later, after everything had happened, she had remembered his face because when she'd kissed Park Ji-soo, she had looked up and seen this man go very pale. The business associate, the one who had arranged the poisoning. He was sitting with his hands folded on the desk, looking at her with the expression of someone who has finally gotten the particular thing they wanted and is in no hurry at all. "I've been wanting to meet you properly," he said. "Sit down." "Let me go," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she deserved credit for. "I don't think so." He stood and walked around the desk slowly. "You cost me considerably, you know. I had a very clean plan. The poison was prepared by a professional. The timing was arranged. The aftermath was managed. And then he paused, his eyes moving over her coldly. You walked across the room and kissed him, and ruined 5 months of work in 3 seconds. He stopped in front of her. "So, I'm going to take my time with this," he said. "And when Park Ji-soo finds out what I've done to his wife, how long it took, what it cost her, I want him to feel every second of it." Adiz breathed. In, out, in, out. She looked at the door, calculated the distance, calculated the men who had brought her here and who were certainly still somewhere in this building. She looked at the man in front of her. She said nothing. He reached behind him and picked something up from the desk, a phone, a camera. She couldn't tell. Her vision was blurring slightly at the edges from fear she was fighting to keep out of her body. "Let's start simple," he said. He smiled. "A message from my old friend Ji-soo." He lifted the camera, and then the window behind him exploded inward. Not gently, not with warning. The glass came in like a wall of shattered light. In the half-second before she understood what was happening, she saw shapes dropping through the gap. 2, then 3, moving low and fast in dark clothing. And then gunfire from somewhere in the corridor outside the office door, methodical and controlled. Park Ji-soo's security, she understood somehow. They were already in the building, had been working through the building, and this was the last room. The man who had been holding the camera spun toward the window, which meant his back was to the door, which opened. Park Ji-soo walked in. He wasn't running. He wasn't shouting. He moved with the same controlled, unhurried efficiency he had in the club, and he crossed the room in 10 steps, and the man who had been sitting behind the expensive desk, who had arranged a poisoning and a kidnapping and had sat across from Adiz 5 minutes ago with the comfortable certainty of someone who believed he was untouchable, took one look at Park Jisu's face and seemed to lose all of the certainty he had ever possessed. "Get away from her," Park Jisu said. His voice was quiet, which Adiz was beginning to understand, when he was the most dangerous. The man stumbled backward. His security, the men who had been stationed in the room, seemed to have evaporated. She realized they had been handled in the corridor, in the other rooms, before Jisu even walked in. He had cleared the entire building to walk through that door and not have to hurry. 2 of Jisu's men secured the man, while a third came straight to Adiz, cutting the restraints at her wrists, steadying her when she swayed. And then Park Jisu was in front of her. He put both hands on her face, careful, and looked at her eyes, her face, checking the same systematic assessment he had done in the club, looking for damage, looking for injury. His jaw was so tight it looked carved. "I'm all right," she said. "You're not," he said. "I will be." He exhaled slowly, and she understood it was the first full breath he had taken since he'd found out she was gone. He dropped his forehead to hers, briefly, just for a moment. His eyes closed. "I told you to stay in the penthouse," he said. "I know. Adiz. I know." A pause. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "My ribs are bruised. I'm shaky, but she swallowed. "I'm here." He pulled back and looked at her, and there was something in his expression she hadn't seen before. Something that had broken through all 5 years of careful construction and was just sitting there on his face, unguarded. Relief. And underneath it, something fiercer. Something that looked a great deal like what she had been trying not to feel herself for the last 5 days. "Jisu," she said. For future reference." She took a shaky breath. "I trust you. I should have stayed." He looked at her for a long moment. "And for future reference," he said quietly, "I'm not letting you out of my sight again." She didn't argue. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his shoulder, and after one careful, deliberate second, his arms came up around her, solid and certain, and she felt her breathing even out for the first time since she'd heard footsteps in the corridor of her apartment building. Outside the shattered window, souls spread out below them. Thousands of lights, thousands of lives, the city enormous and indifferent, and exactly the same as it had been that night in the club 5 days ago, when everything changed. But Adiz was different. She had walked into a dangerous man's orbit to save his life and had not expected to survive the consequences, let alone find in the middle of all of it something that felt, terrifyingly and wonderfully, like the beginning of something real. She closed her eyes. She let herself rest. That's where we leave them today. And I know, you have questions. What happens to the man who arranged all of it? What does Park Jisu do next? And what about the contract? When it comes time to end it, will either of them actually want to? Drop your theories in the comments below. I read every single one. Like this video if this story has you in a chokehold. Subscribe if you're new to this family, and hit that notification bell, because part 2 is coming, and when Adiz and Jisu finally say out loud what they've both known since that first kiss in the club, Seoul is going to feel it. This is Mafia Crown Secrets. See you next time, family.